So as I do occasionally, sometimes I digress from the Parsha to talk about Shabbos or other things. A few weeks ago we talked about Shabbos, and I would like to continue talking about Shabbos a little bit. Remember that in the fourth commandment of the Aseres HaDibros, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, remember the day of Shabbos to keep it holy. And Chazal say that actually means during the week you should be thinking about Shabbos. That's why we don't have a name for the days of the week in Hebrew. There is no name for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It goes Yom Rishon, day 1, Yom Sheni, day 2. And that actually means, that's an abbreviated, that's Yom Rishon la Shabbat, the first day towards the Shabbos. So whenever you say the Shir, in fact, I think Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach had the minhag that when he would say the Yom, the song of the day, Hayom Yom Rishon LaShabbos, and he would say, and he is intending to be Makayim, the mitzvah of remembering the day of Shabbos to keep it holy. So as a result, it's always good to talk about Shabbos, because that way we're remembering Shabbos during the week, and we are fulfilling the mitzvah of remembering the day of Shabbos to keep it holy. So I want to talk about the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos, because you may not have noticed that the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos is very unusual. There's a certain uniqueness to the Amidah that you don't have for any other holiday. A typical Shmona Esrei, actually I shouldn't call it, Shmona Esrei is a misnomer by definition. Shmona Esrei literally means 18 blessings. Now, number one, you can't talk about the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos, because the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos has 7 blessings. How can I say the 18 blessing prayer of Shabbos has 7 blessings? So that's why technically the correct word for Shmona Esrei is Amidah, the standing prayer. So I'm not going to say the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos has 7 blessings, but the Amidah of Shabbos has 7 blessings. Even during the week, Shmona Esrei is not accurate, because in point of fact, it is not. There are 19 blessings, not 18. Originally there were 18. But Rabban Gamliel added a 19th against the heretics and the informers. So the blessing against the heretics, that was added by, that it's not in the 19th position, but it was added as the 19th bracha of the Shmona Esrei. But the Amidah of Shabbos is 7. And the structure is, first 3 brachos are the same as you say during the week. Last 3 brachos are the same as you say during the week. The middle bracha is about the holiness of the day. Now that pattern of 3, 3 with a middle bracha called Kedushas Hayom, the holiness of the day, that is a common feature of Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shabbos, Yom Tov, you always have a middle bracha called Kedushas Hayom. But with all Yomim Tovim, the Kedushas Hayom blessing is identical whether it's Ma'ariv, Shachris, or Mincha. So, on Sukkot, the middle bracha is the same. That's why you look in a siddur. It'll say, the Tefillah for Yom Tov, Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha. Musaf is different. Musaf is always different. But we're talking about Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha. The only holiday, the only holy day, in which there's a different blessing for Ma'ariv and for Shachris and for Mincha is Shabbos. Even Yom Kippur, it's the same middle bracha. Same middle bracha. I mean, it's a longer Shmona Esrei, but it's the same. The bracha does not change. The only holiday where the middle bracha changes is Shabbos. Even then, the last paragraph of the middle bracha is more or less the same, but you do have a prior paragraph. Now, what is that? Friday night, the Kedushas Hayom paragraph begins with Atah Kidashta, you Hashem have sanctified the 7th day, and we recite the paragraph Vayechulu from Breitowitz that the heaven and earth were completed and God rested. Shabbos morning, we have a different opening. Yismach Moshe. Moshe rejoices when he brought down the 10 Commandments, and the psukim we recite are V'shamru b'nei Yisrael as a Shabbos, that the Jewish people kept Shabbos to be an eternal sign. Shabbos Mincha, we talk about Atoy Echad, you are one, and your name is one, and who is like your nation, Yisrael, unique in the world. 3 different openings for Kedushas Hayom, which no other holiday has. Every other holiday has the same opening. For Yom Tov, it happens to be Atah B'Chartanu. So what is the significance of the 3 different openings of Ma'ariv, Shachris, and Mincha? So I'm going to give you 2 explanations, although they overlap a little bit. The first is from the Abudraham. Now the Abudraham, that's an old Sephardic name. Rav David Abudraham was a Rishon, a late Rishon, a Spanish, who wrote a very, very great and authoritative sefer on an all inyanim of Tefillah and the Jewish calendar. And Rav Yosef Karo in the Bes Yosef often will bring the Abudraham as an authority. So for some reason we call him by, just like the Abarbanel. I mean, it's his last name. But for some reason we call him the Abudraham or the Abarbanel, etc. So the Abudraham offers the following explanation, which is actually a very, very interesting explanation. We know that Shabbos is described in Kabbalah in particular as a marriage between the Jewish people and Hashem. Meaning Hashem, actually the imagery is kind of contradictory here, but in this imagery, Hashem is the Chasan, and we are the Kala. And Shabbos represents the coming together of the Chasan and the Kala. Now the reason why I say there's contradictory imagery is because there's another image in which we are the Chasan and Shabbos is the Kala. That's the Chadeli, come my friend to greet the bride. So we're kind of hermaphrodite, if I could use that expression, meaning to say, with respect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are the Kala. With respect to the Shabbos, we are the Chasan, right? So we have those 2 ideas. But let's focus now on the idea that we're the Kala. Shabbos is a day of marriage, a day of union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is why many people have a beautiful minhag. It's a minhag that's a very ancient vintage, that either Friday afternoon before Shabbos or after Mincha before Kabbalah Shabbos, like you look in the Siddur, there is Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. And people read Shir HaShirim before Shabbos. Now, Shir HaShirim is a love song. Shir HaShirim, not a sing. Shir HaShirim is love poetry. It's actually romantic. It talks about the love of a man for a woman and a woman for a man. Very passionate. Some of the psukim are erotic. Ad kidei kach, that there were some rabbis who felt that the Shir HaShirim does not belong in the Jewish Bible. What are you putting in love poetry for? They wanted to censor it. They wanted to consign it to Shemus. The great defender of Shir HaShirim was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva got it in. So if we have Shir HaShirim in our Tanakh, we have to give our thanks to Rabbi Akiva for saving it, because Rabbi Akiva said, if all of the songs of the Tanakh are holy, Shir HaShirim is the holiest of the holy, because although it describes the sensuous, sensual love of a man for a woman, and in the other direction as well, it is really describing the love of Hashem for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people for Hashem. So Shabbos is a wedding day, and as a result, Shir HaShirim talks about that type of love. Now, the Abudraham says a wedding or a marriage really has 3 stages. Stage 1 is what the Torah and Chazal call erusin. Now, here this is something important. In modern Hebrew, erusin means to get engaged. But that's not, it's simply not accurate. Erusin in the Torah was actually a first stage of marriage. In the time of the Torah, and even in the time of the Gemara, the Chassan would give the Kala a ring or a coin or anything worth some money, and say, Hareat Mekudeshesli, you are married to me, you are sanctified to me with this coin. And at that point, she's an Arusa. She's a married woman. If you were to terminate the marriage, you'd have to give a get. The only thing is, strangely, the marriage would not be consummated for a year. She actually stayed with her father for a year to raise a dowry. At the end of the year, the husband would come, recite the Sheva Brachos, and then take her into his home, and the marriage would be consummated after a year. So stage 1 is called Erusin. Stage 2 is called Nisuin. In the modern Jewish marriage, we actually do these 2 steps that used to be a year apart, and we do them right away. You wouldn't automatically know this by just watching a wedding, a chasna. But in fact, when the chasan gives the kala a ring and says, Harei at mekudeshet li, that is erusin. If you would be at a wedding 2,000 years ago, that would be the end of the wedding and you'd go home. Maybe they gave a modest meal for erusin. A year later, they would recite Sheva Brachos, and the chassan would take the kala to his home. So you see the difference? We think of Sheva Brachos as the end of the marriage ceremony. It's not the end of the marriage ceremony. It's the beginning of part 2. Part 2 of the ceremony is Sheva Brachos, and then Yichud, seclusion in a room, which is symbolically the chassan bringing his wife into his home. Okay? And the Sheva Brachos were separated from the Erusin by 12 months. An Arusa is your wife, but you're not obligated to support her. If, God forbid, she dies, you don't inherit her property. You cannot annul her vows except with the father. Once she is a Nasua, I am obligated in her support. I inherit her property when she dies, and I have the power to annul her vows if I do so on the day that I heard the vows. Right? Erusin and Nisuin. The Iker Simcha of a marriage is Nisuin, because Erusin, she's married to me, but we're not together, we're not sharing a home. So now, here's what the Abudraham says. There's a lot, you needed to have this back knowledge. The Abudraham says, Shabbos is a celebration of our marriage to Hashem. But like every human marriage, we go through stages, and as Shabbos progresses, the relationship is more and more intense. So, we start off when Shabbos begins, Hashem betroths us. We are like an arusa. What is the synonym for erusin? Also called kiddushin. Kiddushin is erusin. So what is the wording at the beginning of the Friday night prayer? Atah kiddashta, you, God, sanctified. Kiddushin. Stage 1, in other words, you get into Shabbos gradually. Stage 1 is arusa. God has betrothed me. Stage 2 is nisuin. Hashem has brought me into his home. And nisuin is the Iker Simcha. The Simcha of a marriage is not in the Erusin, it is in the nisuin. And that is why Shabbos morning, Yismach Moshe. Moshe rejoices. Friday night is Kiddashta, which is Kiddushin, Erusin. Shabbos morning is, so to speak, spiritually, we're now in Hashem's home. And that's Simcha, Yismach Moshe. Now those are the 2 levels of marriage. But after those 2 levels of marriage happen, we are now ready for the ultimate intimacy between husband and wife, and that is consummation. Now, consummation is not part of the marriage ceremony. In fact, people sometimes make a mistake. In the secular world, it's sometimes said, although I don't even think that's accurate, if a marriage was not consummated, it's not a valid marriage. That is not true halachically. If you've had erusin and nisuin, you have a marriage. Consummation comes as a result of that marriage, but consummation is not an element of the marriage per se. Now, how does the Torah describe the relationship of husband and wife? A man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So consummation is described as the unification of two people who were different. And that is what Mincha says. Ata echad, you God are one and we are one and we become one with you. So you see the Abarbanel's imagery. The Abarbanel is basically saying that Shabbos is a progression and a deepening of the levels of intimacy we have in our relationship with God. We start off as an arusa, a betrothed woman. And then we're brought into God's home as a nesua. And then there is consummation. Now obviously, these are metaphors. I mean, consummation. I mean, obviously, there's no intercourse with God. But I do want to point out, though, that you have to understand that certain Christian ideas, in fact, virtually all Christian ideas, are based on distortions of Jewish ideas. I mean, you understand this. The Christian myth that God impregnated Mary, the virgin birth, is based on the idea that mystically there is such a thing. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble there. There is such a thing as consummation with God. But it's understood that that's not a literal physical process. That's just referring to that's referring to a level of intimacy, a level of connectiveness. So we're kind of borrowing, an image that shows that togetherness. But if you were fixated on literalism and you had a vivid imagination and you hear these types of metaphors, so you start imagining that, God has sex with a woman, which of course I can assure you, does not happen. But the funny thing is that the vocabulary of metaphor that Judaism employs would permit a person to make that mistake. That is one of the reasons why they tell you not to learn Kabbalah, right? Because you have these images, and you might distort them by making them overly literal, and then, God forbid, you're blaspheming God and you're being sacrilegious. Okay, so be very, very careful. I hope you understand that the things I'm describing are not meant at all in a literal way or a physical way, but they are describing deepening of intimacy, strengthening of connection, which means actually it's the opposite of sometimes the way we experience reality. We experience Shabbos in almost a reverse way. We tend to be psyched up when Shabbos begins. Shabbos begins, we have the Friday night meal. And then Shabbos morning already, the cold cuts, right, whatever it is, it doesn't have the same beauty of the Friday night. And by Suda Shalishis, with peanut butter or whatever it is, we're kind of ready. All right, Shabbos is almost over. We kind of get petered out. We kind of, maybe as Shabbos goes on, we lose our enthusiasm. But in the spiritual world, it actually should be the opposite. We begin as God's betrothed. And by the time we end, we have the intimacy of consummation. That Shabbos should get deeper and deeper and deeper into our souls, till by the time Shabbos is over, we're agonized. We don't want it to end. As opposed to looking at the clock, when is it going to end? As it were. And that's why, indeed, the halacha says, when you make Havdalah, you have to have spices, besamim. Why? Because you're losing your extra soul, and you're weak, and you're faint, and you're depressed. And you need to be revived by smelling salts or the like, because a person feels saddened that Shabbos is leaving. This is even why the Zemiros of Suda Shalishis were traditionally kind of slower, a little sadder, a yearning type of thing, because that's the emotion of Suda Shalishis, in which in the twilight, as the day of Shabbos is passing into the night, that will be Chol, there's a sadness in our soul and a yearning to hold on to Hashem on the level of Shabbos. Right? So that's the Abudraham's very interesting pshat, that both the 3 meals of Shabbos and the 3 prayers of Shabbos, the meals and the prayers, correspond to different stages of marital intimacy based on the idea that Shabbos is a marriage between Am Yisrael and the Shechina, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the metaphor of Shir HaShirim. That, again, it's a beautiful minhag, actually, if you can find time to do it, to read Shir HaShirim. Again, if you can't do it, I mean, in the Siddur, it's placed between Kabbalah, Shabbos, and Ma'ariv. Now, I speak between Kabbalah, Shabbos, and Ma'ariv, so I can't tell you to, well, you're allowed to. If you want to read Shir HaShirim instead of listening to my drasha, you have my permission. But you can also do it before Mincha as well, and read Shir HaShirim in the afternoon. In fact, I remember years ago, I don't know if they still do it, because I've never been there to see it done. But there's a stretch of the Kotel, it's called the Small Kotel. Are you familiar with that idea? Because you have the Western Wall Plaza, which is a big, big thing. But the Kotel keeps on going. So in somebody's backyard, in the Arab Quarter, there's like a piece of the Kotel that's just in somebody's backyard. And it's not really open to the public that much. People don't go there. It's not the safest place to go anyway. But some people do go there, and small groups of people. It's called the Kaisel HaKatan. They pray and they daven by the small kotel, so you have to go kind of deep into the Muslim quarter. And I remember reading a description when they were inviting people, that some group was inviting people to come daven Kabbalah Shabbos by the Kaisel HaKatan, and they described it like this. All the people who come dress all in white. There's an old, maybe you've seen this, there's an old tradition from the Arizal that Big Day Shabbos should be 100% white. Some people have such a minhag, but when I say white, I include everything, including shoes. On Shabbos you only wear white, hat, everything, huh? Kippahs. Yeah, the kippah, yeah, everything white. And that's from the Arizal. It actually is from the Arizal. And they said that we will read Shir HaShirim pasuk by pasuk, after Kabbalah Shabbos. So that type of idea, and it was really I never found my way there. I get lost pretty easily, so I don't like to get lost in the in the Muslim quarter. But that would be some type of experience to really appreciate the holiness of Shabbos, and the fact that Shabbos is a time of love and a time of intimacy with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the pshat of the Abudraham in the prayers of Shabbos. Yeah.
Is there value in reading Shir HaShirim before Kabbalah Shabbat, even if the person doesn't really fully understand everything that's in Shir HaShirim?
Well, Al Pi Kabbalah, there is a value. I mean, again, as a rationalist would say that the value of Shir HaShirim is when you absorb the message. But even so, you can be inspired by Shir HaShirim even if you don't know what it means pasuk by pasuk by pasuk, if you know the general idea. This is a love song, a song of connection, and the like. So I think that even on a rational level, you can be inspired a lot, and mystically, the words themselves elevate you. By the way, another time that people read Shir HaShirim is after the Seder, Pesach night. Right? I mean, Sephardim, many Haggadahs, Ashkenazic Haggadahs as well, will have Shir HaShirim afterwards, because once again, Pesach night is a special night of love, and therefore we read Shir HaShirim in that way. So that's pshat number 1 in the 3 prayers of Shabbos, the Abudraham, 3 stages of marriage. Let me give you pshat number 2 from the Torah, Rav Yaakov ben Asher, the Baal HaTurim. And the Torah says that the 3 prayers of Shabbos correspond to 3 pivotal Shabboses. 2 of them in our history, and 1 of them in our future. The very first Shabbos that we celebrate is the Shabbos of creation. That was the very first Shabbos, that God created the world in 6 days, and he rested on Shabbos. So Friday night, the theme is the Shabbos of creation. That is why the Torah verses that we read in the Amidah of Ma'ariv is Vayechulu, that God made the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. So, Friday night celebrates creation. The next great Shabbos was the Shabbos that Hashem gave us the Torah. We have a Messiah. You can't prove it. Chazal say there was a Messiah that Hashem gave the Aseres HaDibros to Am Yisrael on Shabbos. So the first Shavuos was on Shabbos. So second great Shabbos is Matan Torah. And that's why in the Shacharis davening we talk about Moshe Rabbeinu carrying the tablets, the Luchos Habonim. Matan Torah. So Friday night, theme is creation. Shabbos morning, the theme is revelation. Now, the third Shabbos is a Shabbos that hasn't happened yet. And that is the Shabbos of Mashiach and Geula. And that is described as Yom Shekulo Shabbos, the day of the eternal Shabbos, meaning every single day will be Shabbos. Now, not in the sense that you won't be able to do Malacha. When Mashiach comes, you'll be able to do Malacha, but it means the connection to Hashem will be as strong as it is on Shabbos. Yom Shekulai Shabbos, redemption. Now, what that means is that when we experience Shabbos, we're experiencing in microcosm what redemption might feel like. Now, redemption is described in Tanakh by the famous pasuk in Zechariah. That's the end of Oleinu. V'haya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. Hashem will become the king, the acknowledged king, over all of the world. Bayom ahu, on that day, Yiyeh Hashem echad. Hashem will be one. Ushemo echad, and his name will be one. The Gemara in Brachos asks right away, what do you mean Hashem will be one? Hashem is one right now. So the Gemara says, of course Hashem is one right now. But in this world, it's as if we perceive multiple gods, because sometimes there's kindness, and sometimes there's cruelty, sometimes there's mercy, and sometimes there's harshness. It's as if there's the God of light and the God of darkness, like Zoroastrianism said. The Midas Hadin and the Midas Harachamim. So in this world, everything looks like two different things. When Mashiach comes, we will understand that all of it is God's mercy, even when it's disguised as sin. That's what it means. God will be one, and his name will be one. So, that's what redemption is. Redemption is Hashem Echad, Ushmo Echad. How does the Mincha, middle bracha, start? Ata Echad. You, God, are one. That's a remez to the Geula, where Hashem will be one. Right? Ata Echad v'shim is mamish parallel. Ata Echad v'shimcha Echad. What does the pasuk say? Hashem Echad, right? Ushmo Echad. Now, what about the next line? Umi ki amcha Yisrael, who is like your nation Israel? Goy Echad bi'aretz, one nation in the world. So that's picking up another thing. Why are we in Golus right now? Why didn't Mashiach come? Why don't we have a Beis HaMikdash? So Chazal tell us that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of the worst Averos, of Avodah Zarah, Gilui Araya, Shvichas Damim. But the second Beis HaMikdash, the Jews were observant. So why was it destroyed? Because of sinas chinam, because of hatred, groundless hatred, needless hatred. Which means we can't have redemption until we become one. So now it's beautiful. The whole structure of that paragraph is the Geula. When the Geula comes, Hashem, you will be one, your name will be one. And the nation of Israel will be one instead of sinas chinam, machlokas, and pirit. So, according to the Torah, it's a different transition. Meaning, according to the Abudraham, the nusach of the prayers are describing levels of marital intimacy that increase. According to the Torah, it's going from creation to redemption. Creation to revelation to redemption. Right? Kind of, again, a transition. Which means by the time you end Shabbos, you're feeling that you've tasted a little bit of redemption. Now, this idea that you go from the Shabbos that I observed to feeling the Shabbos of Mashiach, you actually see this in the wonderful poem that is recited by all Jewish communities, Ashkenazim, Sephardim, Teimanim. It's very, very rare that a later composition is recited by everybody, and that is the poem L'cha Dodi. That not everybody sings it. In yeshivas we sing it, other shows, some people chant it, but whether you chant it or you sing it, I believe everybody says. I may be wrong. I don't think there's any nusach in Klal Yisrael that doesn't say the poem L'cha Dodi, although some stanzas are skipped in some kehilas. Yeah. So L'cha Dodi was written, as you know, by Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who was a Talmid Chaver of the Arizal in Tzfat, and the verses of L'cha Dodi spell out Shlomo, right? The first letter of each verse is a letter of his name. It spells out Shlomo Halevi. It doesn't spell Alkabetz, that would have been too long, but Shlomo Halevi. And then Boi B'Shalom is a separate conclusion of the song. It's not part of the acrostic itself. If you look at the Teichen of L'cha Dodi, what is striking is how little of the song is about Shabbos. Most of the song is not about Shabbos. The first stanza says, Shamar v'zochar, we talked about that. Shamar, God said, remember the Shabbos, keep the Shabbos and remember the Shabbos. Right? Hashem gave us both of that, okay? That's about Shabbos. The second stanza, Likras Shabbos, let us go and greet the Shabbos. Because Shabbos is the source of all bracha. Okay, that's wonderful. But then, starting with the third stanza, going almost to the end, is not about Shabbos anymore. It talks about Yerushalayim is destroyed, the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, please Hashem return your Shekhinah. It's nothing to do with Shabbos. And then at the end, the very last stanza, Boi B'Shalom, come in peace. I forgot about you, Shabbos. Boi B'Shalom, come on in. If you would be an editor, right, somebody gives you a poem, this is a poem about Shabbos, right, you would take your red pen and say, well, I'm going to scratch out 6 stanzas here. It's not about Shabbos. It's about Golus, it's about Geula, it's about a yearning for Partzi, which is Peretz, David HaMelech, the restoration of King David HaMelech. But the answer is this. The answer is, there used to be a potato chip commercial for Lay's potato chips. Bet you can't eat one. That was their commercial. When you eat one, you're going to keep on, eating and eating and eating them. Meaning, when we taste something really, really good, we want more of it. It's good. So here's what's going on. Rav Shlomo Alkabetz is describing the holiness of Shabbos. He's describing the idea that it is me'ein olam haba. You're experiencing olam haba. But it's not all olam haba. It's only a taste of olam haba. But when he tastes olam haba, he tastes the closeness to Hashem. He wants more. So he says, Hashem, bring the Mashiach, bring the Geula, build the Beis HaMikdash. How long are we going to be separated? This is what Shabbos brought him to. From Shabbos, he realized how much we don't have in this world. Wow. Shabbos gave him the yearning for Geula because he tasted it. He tasted it on Shabbos. He wants more. But then, he has to face the reality. Mashiach's not here yet. Beis HaMikdash is not here yet. but I do have Shabbos. Boi b'shalom. That's why at the very end he goes back to Shabbos because he says, listen, we aren't there yet. Like, you ask your father, you ask your parent, you're on a long trip, are we almost there? He says, we're not there yet. Rav Shlomo Alkabetz is telling us, we're not there yet, but we have Shabbos as a way station to keep us going. So, in a sense, the long digression about Mashiach is not out of place. It's what he feels when he experiences Shabbos. It's a wonderful thing. It should be what we feel when we experience Shabbos. I'm not going to say that we always feel that way, but it's something to think about. And, the important thing is, Chazal say, I think I may have mentioned this a few weeks ago, so forgive me for repeating, but it's a good ending for both that earlier share and this year. It says, he who prepares on Erev Shabbos will have food on Shabbos. Now, the Pashat Pshat is very true. If you want to eat on Shabbos, you got to prepare. Now, you can prepare in different ways. You can cook the food, you can buy ready-made food, or get yourself a good invitation, talk to Rabbi Samet, or whatever it is. You got to prepare. If you don't prepare how you're going to eat, you're not going to eat. So Pashat Pshat is perfectly right. But there's a deeper meaning as well. And the deeper meaning is, food is not just physical food. Food is spiritual food, the soul food. And by soul food, I don't mean collard greens and fried chicken in Harlem, but there's a genuine food of the soul. So what Chazal are saying is, if you want to have soul food on Shabbos, you got to prepare before Shabbos. Meaning you can't just walk into Shabbos and expect everything's going to happen to me. Baruch Hashem, even then, you can feel something. But it's much weaker than if you prepared. And that's why we prepare. That's why I know in some yeshivos, I mean, even here to some degree, although it depends on the Mishmar, but you have Mishmar Thursday night, right? So part of Mishmar is to put us in the spirit, to be open for the holiness of Shabbos. And some places they sing Ko'echsov, they sing different yearning Zemiros Thursday night to get ready for the holiness of Shabbos. And that's what it means. He who prepares on Erev Shabbos will eat on Shabbos. Eat meaning not just physical food, but the soul food of Shabbos Kodesh. Okay, so B'ezras Hashem, I hope that we should all think about this. We take Shabbos for granted because it comes so often. Yom Tov we think is more special because it only comes, once in the year, twice in the year. But the truth of the matter is, in some ways, that which you need more often is more important. For example, you need water more than you need steak. So steak is exciting, but without the water, there's no way you can live. So Shabbos is like water. Shabbos is like oxygen. So Hashem gives us a lot of it because it is necessary for life. Right? So B'ezras Hashem, we should appreciate the gift of Shabbos, and B'ezras Hashem should bring us to a geula. Shleimus, because I'll say if we keep 2 Shabboses, there will be Mashiach. Okay, take care.